Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Today's organization spotlight is on the OL Trio Foundation. Here is what the founder had to say. OL Trio Foundation is named in honor of my late triplets, with OL representing the first and second names of the babies. The foundation is committed to raising awareness about premature births and providing support to underprivileged families with premature babies. We focus on offering essential resources like baby clothing, care packs, and ongoing assistance to parents navigating the challenges of raising premature babies, especially those in the Kangaroo Mother Care program. Our mission is to ensure that no family faces this journey alone by providing practical help, education, and a supportive community. Premature births can be overwhelming, especially for parents who weren't prepared for their baby's early arrival. Many are unfamiliar with the challenges of caring for a premature baby and lack the means to provide for their immediate needs. Through our work with Laratong Hospital in Kagiso, South Africa, we focus on parents with babies in the Kangaroo Mother Care program, which teaches mothers how to care for their premature newborns. We provide care packs that include toiletries, baby clothing, and other essentials for both the babies and the moms during their stay. We also raise funds to continue supporting these families when they return home. Additionally, we've created a WhatsApp support group where moms can connect, share experiences, and find someone to talk to. This community is a space for encouragement and advice from those who understand the journey of caring for a premature baby. A dietitian and a nurse are also part of the group, providing medical advice and expert guidance on care and nutrition. Our goal is to ensure that when these mothers and babies leave the hospital, they are equipped with essentials such as baby clothes, nappies, and other supplies. Many families we assist are facing economic hardship, with some parents being unemployed or without a strong support system. OL Trio Foundation is committed to helping them through these difficult times, providing both material resources and education on caring for premature babies. At OL Trio Foundation, we believe that no parent should face this journey alone. Through donations, community support, and our WhatsApp group, we aim to give these families hope, strength, and practical assistance as they navigate the challenges of raising a premature baby. Thank you so much for sharing about your amazing organization with us. Today, I am talking with Danielle. She lost her daughter Lydia at 21 months due to an undiagnosed congenital defect. Danielle founded Love for Lydia in her honor and is working to connect lost families and continue to share her daughter's story. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Danielle. Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. First of all, thank you for having me, Sarah. This is a great opportunity. I love your podcast and you've had really great people on and I've learned so much from this podcast as well. So I just really appreciate your time. My name is Danielle. I'm a mom to two girls, Lydia, who was born in March of 2021 and died on Christmas of 2022. And also I have a rainbow baby who was just born in May of this year. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am the founder of Love from Lydia, which is a nonprofit organization that I started a few months after she died. And I'm also a Peer Connections volunteer with the SUDC Foundation.
That's amazing. It sounds like you're doing so many great things in her honor.
Yeah, thank you.
And I imagine that must have been, losing a baby is hard no matter when, but I'm sure that on Christmas itself has made the holidays probably a little harder.
Absolutely. And, we're coming up on December, so this is the hardest month of the year for me. But for any lost parent, holidays are hard. And it's, how do you celebrate them while also grieving? And, it's just such a complicated time of year for everyone, really. But, having the loss on Christmas it just has this whole other layer, which I'm sure we'll get into as well.
So do you mind talking a little bit about your lost journey?
Sure. So Lydia was born in March of 2021. I I have PCOS, so it was very difficult for me to get pregnant. I don't ovulate on my own. I need medical intervention in order to get pregnant. So in the beginning, we tried everything. We tried the Clomid, and eventually with Lydia, we were able to conceive on letrozole with a medicated cycle with a reproductive endocrinologist. So we had her. She was perfect, like absolutely perfect. She had some minor medical issues along the way, like GI stuff, and she had a pretty significant umbilical hernia, which she needed surgery for when she was 17 months old. But other than that, she was a happy, healthy child. And on Christmas, she woke up just not feeling well. She was very lethargic and didn't want to eat and was just crying. So she was in daycare at the time, so we just figured she probably picked up a bug and she just needs to sleep it off and she'll be okay. She just had a slight fever, like it wasn't even over 101, like it was, pretty minor. So I gave her some Tylenol. I had her take a nap. We made the decision not to open presents yet, just to wait until after she woke up from her nap. So I had been up with her the night before because she wasn't sleeping very well, but she didn't seem like she was in pain or anything, just having trouble sleeping. So I took a nap during the same time, and a couple hours had passed and I woke up and I was like, that's strange. Like she doesn't usually sleep this long. So I went to her room and tried to wake her up, and I actually remember standing in her room looking at her, and she just looked like she normally does. She just looked very peaceful, and I remember thinking like, oh, I'm glad she's sleeping well. She looks so peaceful, and tried to wake her up, but she wasn't moving, which at that point I started getting nervous and I yelled for my husband, who ran upstairs. I wound up giving her CPR until paramedics arrived, but she never regained any signs of life. But they still brought her to the hospital, and tried all medical interventions at that point. And, it was in the hospital where I really it was such a pivotal moment, because in the hospital, like, we didn't receive any resources, we didn't receive any support. Something that I'll get into further is the interaction that I had with the police that day, which contributed to our trauma. But she for a while it was just me in the hospital because they didn't let my husband come with me. So it was me in the hospital, just laying in bed with my daughter, with her body. And yeah, it was, we went into the hospital with a baby, and we left with the clothes that she was wearing that day. And, not even a piece of paper that said, this is who you call, or, a suicide hotline number, or, any sort of resource where, my husband and I are both mental health professionals. So we know where to find resources if we need them, which, we're pretty fortunate in that way, but not a lot of people are fortunate in that way. Like, where do you go? And especially when you're in that state of trauma and shock, you know, you can't do those things. That's the last thing on your mind is like, how do I get help? It's just like you're just trying to survive at that point. So, that experience really affected me. And I was like, I can't imagine anyone going through that again without the proper resources. So like this needs to change. So I started Love from Lydia, and really it's just to provide lost parents with support. So one of the main programs that I'm starting right now is called COPE, which is connecting our personal experiences. And it's really designed to match newly bereaved parents with a parent who is further out in their grief. So, just someone to talk to, just having a contact person, being in the hospital, I remember like I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want anyone's advice. If you haven't lost a child, don't even bother talking to me, because like, who are you to give me this advice? And I know a lot of lost parents feel that way, because unless you've been through it, you don't know what is going on in my head, in my body, the physical, the emotional. There's just so many layers involved. And, I know there are some programs like that out there, but a lot of times families aren't matched with other lost parents until further out, when they're in the state where they're they're ready to receive resources and to look for them on their own. But the program that I'm starting is really designed to get them immediately after the loss when they're still in shock and they need support. They need someone to help guide them through this process. Preparing them for conversations that they might need to have. Like I remember being in the funeral home, and one of the first questions that was asked of us was, do you want to bury or cremate your child? And my husband and I just looked at each other like, that's not a question that we ever expected to consider, and we weren't even in the state to think about like, oh, that's a decision we will have to make. So, just having the opportunity to talk to a lost parent who has experienced the loss of their child and, can help guide them through those questions and those just the help that they need. And really the connections that I've made with lost parents, that's been the driving factor of my grief journey. Like I am where I am today because of the people that I've met in my journey. So those connections are so important to me. And I just feel like, with this community of lost parents, we really need to stick together and help each other.
I think that is such an amazing thing that you're starting because, yeah, like you said, I think it's really beneficial to talk to other people who have been through it. And I think, especially with what you're doing, that someone who has newly been through a loss, talking to someone who maybe 5 years, 10 years, however long, even a year into their
Right.
loss, I think they can just offer so much more perspective than someone who's never been through a loss. And, they can say, yes, this is how I felt, but this is how it's gotten better, or this is how it's changed, or just, those kind of things. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it boils down to providing hope for people, right? Because I remember leaving the hospital and being like, there's no way anyone has ever experienced anything so tragic, which obviously I now know is not the case because I've met so many families along the way who have experienced such terrible situations. But in that moment, you are just focused on surviving yourself and you can't imagine this happening to anyone else, especially if you don't have the connections to someone who's already lost a child. So at that point, you feel not only are you feeling the grief and the shock, but you feel alone. Like, who do you go to and who is there to talk to? And, you're blaming yourself, even if it has nothing to do with you. You go through all these different stages. I do want to mention that we later found out from the autopsy that Lydia died from a congenital defect, but that we had no idea existed. The the medical examiner said, as soon as they examined her, they clearly saw what was going on, and they said it's a lot of the children that they see with this defect don't typically live past 1 year old. So, the fact that we got even longer with her, you know, I don't know, do I call it a miracle? Do I, I guess I struggle with that. Like, I'm so grateful for all of the time that I got to spend with Lydia. And, since then, I've talked to so many different medical professionals, and they've always said, it's a silent killer. It's something that, her body, it was just a ticking time bomb in her body. And the signs and symptoms are just so rare and you don't know that you can't catch them. They look like other things, like the slight fever. Kids get slight fevers all the time,
Yeah. It's like, how would you ever think that, you
right?
just, yeah, sometimes I just think it's a miracle any of us are here.
Yeah.
Being part of this community now, it's just, way too much about every little thing that can go wrong, like from conception to after birth. And it's just, sometimes it's a scary thing to know that much.
Oh, absolutely. That I think I thought of that the entire time through my second pregnancy, with my living child, and just having met so many lost parents who have lost their children from, you know, exactly what you're saying, from conception to up until, whenever, when they're older and you think they're healthy and everything's fine, or you're having a healthy pregnancy and everything seems fine, and then all of a sudden it's not. And in my first pregnancy with Lydia, I was an anxious parent to begin with, as I know a lot of people, when you're first pregnant, you're worried about every symptom and everything, but then you throw on top of there all of the horror stories that it's it's so tough. And even now, I think about my daughter's 6 months now, and I think about, you know, I don't know what it's like to have a child after 21 months old. So we just recently got through the anniversary of the amount of time that Lydia was alive. I'm now grieving her for longer than she was alive. So that was a very difficult hurdle to get through. And, I think the next one I'm thinking of is when, my rainbow baby now, when she gets to the age that Lydia was when she died. And, there's always going to be these, well, Lydia didn't get to experience this. And you really change your perspective on the fragility of life. And also, you know, I see now the way I'm parenting, how it's different from how I parented Lydia. So I'm trying to bring my baby out all the places. I want her to have all the experiences because Lydia didn't get those. And I was a nervous first-time mom with Lydia, and she stayed in the house. It was also during COVID. So, I really kept her close. And this time around, I'm like, nope, we're going to do everything.
Which I think is so interesting to hear because I've been kind of the opposite. Like I'm a complete anxious person too, like so anxious. And I do have living children at home, but now like I get times where I just like don't want to take them anywhere because I'm scared that like taking them anywhere that something could happen to them. And so then it makes me like more scared. But then I'm like, but then I don't want to keep them from doing things. So it's kind of a hard struggle sometimes.
I completely get that because I go through those as well, where I'm like, well, you know, we could get hit by a car. We could, you know, I, I know families who these freak accidents have happened that had nothing to do with vehicles, but just they happen, right? And you don't hear stories about that until this whole community, and then you're like, where are you safe, right? Like, who is safe? No one's safe. And then you can kind of spiral into that, I just want to like live in a bubble with my baby and everything, like, just the two of us be safe together.
Is that an option? No, I'm just kidding.
And with my baby, like with Lydia, I did all the things. I did all the right things. I only fed her organic foods. I did all this like excuse me, safe sleep. I did every single thing right. And I did everything by the book. And it's like, well, she still died. So then I get into those mindsets too with this baby. It's like, if I don't give her something that's organic one day, like, what is that going to do? It'd be okay. And, I did all the right things the first time and she still died. So, I'm trying not to put as much pressure on myself this time around. I also want to mention that the baby that we have now is an IVF baby. So when we went back to get pregnant, when we went with the same fertility specialist, and he basically told us, based on everything that has happened, in order to, I guess, mitigate any possible future losses, he wanted to explore IVF with us and also give us the chance to freeze embryos. Early menopause runs in my family, so I'm in my late 30s now. So if we want to have more children after her, it'll give us the opportunity and not so much stress. So that's why we went with that decision as well.
So was it something that they determined was genetic or was it just a random thing?
It's been described to us by some medical professionals as bad luck. Just, how she grew in the womb. It's a congenital defect. One thing that I am really grateful for is, we chose the same pediatrician that we had for Lydia for this baby as well, which, we trust her so much. And she really, she has this like personal aspect to treatment now because she had Lydia and she saw Lydia go through everything and be great. And then in the end, she died. So, she's extra cautious now with our rainbow baby. And she sent us to CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, for different specialists just to rule things out. And, you know, I'm perfectly fine to bring her to the doctors every single day if it means like more people have eyes on her. So I just appreciated that, you know, she was kind of going above and beyond to just ease everyone's concerns. So we did a fluoroscopy a couple months ago where she drinks the dye and then they watch the dye travel through her system to make sure there's no blockages or anything. So what Lydia died from was a congenital mesenteric defect, so which led to a volvulus, which is basically the twisting of her organs. And so doing the fluoroscopy showed that everything was traveling where it should be, and there wasn't anything to be concerned about in this moment in time. But things could also happen in the future. So, but we know for right now, everything seems to be working properly, but there's always the what ifs and the stories, you know.
No, I laugh when you say in this moment in time because that just describes like everything about loss,
Yep.
pregnancy after loss, like all of it. We're like, well, this moment things are okay, but and I try not, I mean, it's really hard to not think that way about our living children because I don't want to think that way like about my kids, you know. I don't want
Right.
to like live in that constant fear and anxiety, but it's really hard.
And I think it also, there's a piece of it that you don't want to manifest anything, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
want to put anything out into the universe that like this could possibly happen. But when you've dealt with loss in your life, especially child loss, that's how your brain operates, right? You go to the worst case scenario, which, you know, people with anxiety to begin with typically do things like that, but you put that on top of child loss and it's like a perfect storm.
Oh, I know. I'm just like I finally had to just go on anxiety medicine because I'm like this is too much. I'm like thinking of every little possible thing that could go wrong. And I'm like this is like I can't handle this anymore, you know.
Yeah, I
It
get
like
it.
becomes a point where you're like, I mean, is this normal? You know?
And that's how it's helped in, you know, forming the connections with other lost parents and being in groups. Like that's what's helped me is when like you're saying, is this normal? I go to my lost moms all the time and I'm like, is it normal to feel this way? And they're like, of course, you know, we
You're
all
like,
have
oh
been
good.
there. So it was helpful, like going, you know, I tried a bunch of different groups after Lydia died until I found the right one for me. And now, you know, I have this great relationship with a bunch of moms who I adore. That's not to say I haven't met amazing moms throughout the journey that I'm still so close with. But this local group that I joined was really helpful, especially during my pregnancy, because a lot of them have had subsequent pregnancies after their losses. So, you know, especially with the hormones, right? When you're pregnant and the grief, your mind goes all over the place. And they really helped to normalize everything that I was feeling and also kind of help me get through those 9 months of pregnancy.
Yeah, and pregnancy after loss is definitely one of those things that's not, it's another thing that's not talked about a lot. It's like, okay, well, you got pregnant again, so you're better, right? Like your problem solved, you have your baby. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But
Yeah, I agree completely. When I got pregnant, I really struggled with how to share that with people because I was so worried that people were going to think, oh, Danielle has a baby now, so she's going to be okay, and forget about Lydia. So I found myself saying, when I was disclosing to people that I was pregnant, I found myself saying, we're going to have another baby rather than I'm pregnant. Because I feel like with that sentiment, it reminds other people that Lydia still existed and she is one of our children still.
so I know you said that you didn't leave the hospital with any resources. Were you able to go out and find resources on your own, like right after loss, or did it take a little time to find them?
Oh, I jumped right in. It was really helpful also, as I mentioned, I'm a social worker. So a lot of the people in my life are also social workers. So I think people in my life kind of went into fixing mode, which we are kind of prone to. So, yeah, some people very close to me looked for resources for me, you know, consulted with other people. I looked for my own resources because I knew where to look. And you know, it leads me to also mention that my husband and I grieve very differently. So he's also a mental health professional, but he didn't go the avenue of doing groups, trying EMDR, you know, doing all these programs with going to loss events, doing all these things. He chose to kind of deal with it more internally and work on projects and everything. And everyone deals with grief differently. So it's interesting to see how, even though we have the same profession, we deal with things very differently.
Yeah, and I know sometimes that can be hard because we think, okay, they're not grieving like us, so maybe they're not grieving at all, or maybe they're not sad because they're not doing it like I do it. But that's, yeah, like you said, we all grieve differently. And, men and women grieve differently. One woman grieves differently from another woman. Like it's just, there's
Yeah.
such a spectrum of grief. There's not just one way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then when did you decide to start Love from Lydia?
So I started Love from Lydia in May of 2023. So about 5 months after she had died. Originally, I started it, I guess, to back up, after she died, I was in this state where, I was crying all the time. I didn't want to get out of bed. I really struggled, as most lost parents do. And I found the only thing that I could do to keep from like pacing or screaming or whatever was to start crocheting. And I just needed to keep my hands busy. And that was really helpful to me. So I don't know, I don't even know why I started it, but I just started crocheting these little white hearts. And I started making hundreds of them, like between when she died and when the wake was. And I wound up crocheting a heart and putting the heart in her, like she's holding it. So she's buried holding one of the hearts in her hand. And then I started giving the hearts to people who were in my life or who really anyone. I gave the hearts to anyone. And it just helped me feel like she was still connected to people. Wherever she is right now, like I was hoping that like her holding the heart that's matching other people, like maybe she can feel that energy or the love that other people have.
I
So I
think
turned
that's so
that,
beautiful.
thank you, thank you. I turned that into now I want to leave them for people to find. And I attached them to little cards that say you've found a hug and people can take it or give it to someone. And then I was like, well, I want them to travel the world because Lydia never got to travel the world. So now people who I know, people who I don't know, anytime they're traveling, they're like, can I have a couple of hearts and leave them in different places? And these hearts have been left in places that I don't think I'll ever get to go see, let alone Lydia didn't get to go see them. They're all like they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're in you know, I at this point almost every state in the United States. And I wound up on my website putting like pinning every time someone drops one somewhere, I pin it to a map. So you can go on the website and actually see every place that a heart has been dropped. So when I'm having a particularly griefy day, sometimes I like to go there and look at the website and just see like there's little dots everywhere, all over the world. And just like seeing how Lydia's spirit has just kind of traveled all over and, leaving a heart now someone knows about her or now she was so little she was not even 2 years old when she died, so she didn't have many friends. She had her friends in school, but they're too young to remember her. So yeah, I just like knowing that other people now know about her and she's kind of creating this like domino effect of kindness too, all of that. It makes me feel good.
I love that so much. And I love having that you have that visual reminder of,
Yeah.
this is where how far she's traveled, how far her story has traveled. I think that's just, amazing. And we all look for ways to keep parenting our children after loss. And I think, that's exactly what you're doing and you're keeping her memory alive. And oh, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. We also, this past weekend, we donated a little free library in her memory that contains only children's books. So we had the ribbon cutting this past weekend, and it was a beautiful ceremony. It's at a playground, a local playground that I used to take her after school and on the weekends and everything. And the township worked really nicely with us, like creating this beautiful space and this little platform so kids can actually go themselves to look in the little free library. And we wound up collecting 515 books that day.
Wow.
which is a lot, which most of them are in my garage right now. Um, but I have a box in my trunk, so every couple of days I'm going to go there and replenish, and just another opportunity to go and visit a space that is about Lydia. So last weekend, well, the weekend before last, before we had the ribbon cutting, it was already established in the playground. And I just sat in the parking lot for maybe 15 minutes and just watched people go and use it, and like watched kids like run up to it and grab some books and leave. And then I watched parents come up to it and read the inscription on it, and then like look at each other, and they were talking, and it just, now they know about Lydia. And it's just like, that's my goal, is I just want the whole world to know about Lydia, because she was so special to me that I want her to be in everyone's life in some aspect.
That's the exact same way I feel about Jasmine. So I completely relate to that. It's just, yeah, anytime somebody, says their name or learns anything about them, just knows, like, is inspired by them, just anything. Yeah, it just makes my day. It's just like, this is exactly what we want
Yeah.
as parents. We want our babies to be remembered.
hmm And, you saying like just the fact that people are saying her name, that is so important. And I go a step further in saying like, I think the ultimate form of love in my mind right now, and, I might have never considered this prior to losing Lydia, is that the ultimate form of love is when someone takes it upon themselves to like honor her in some way without me asking, or visiting her grave and just like sending me a picture and just being like, hey, I just want to just stop by and visited Lydia today. Like that is so special to me, because as lost parents, as I'm sure you know, like we worry that people are going to over time forget about them, right? Like they're always going to be in our minds. We think about them every second of the day, but when they're not physically here, other people go about their day. Like what I really struggled with as time went on is how I was thinking about her constantly, and then other people weren't. And I could tell other people weren't, because they would do and say things so innocently that I'd be like, how do you not know? Like how are you not like taking into consideration that like I'm grieving Lydia. I'm always going to be grieving Lydia.
Yeah, that is something I really struggled with too. I'm like, how I just had the worst possible thing happen to me, and the world just keeps moving like nothing happened. And over here, your world is just never the same. And you're expected to go back and go to work and be normal and, all these things. And like you said, over time, people mention them less, people check in on you less, people make those comments. And it's hard when you feel like you're the only one struggling to keep their name out there.
Exactly. And I think that's really what has pushed me to really focus on Love from Lydia, and also do different things like creating this little free library, and doing different events that help other people, like give people the permission, or the like it's telling them like this, we want to celebrate her still. So I think if I want to say this in a way that is, I don't mean it all to be dismissing, but I think sometimes when parents, sometimes we need to kind of take responsibility to continue talking about them, to remind other people, because it's not someone else's responsibility to remember our children. We would love that. That means so much to us. But sometimes we need to open the door for those things to happen. So I I don't know if people would still honor Lydia. I think a few people in my life who are really close to me, but if I didn't keep talking about her, and if I didn't have like, okay, everyone, we're going to do this ribbon cutting ceremony, please come, and support us and celebrate Lydia. And so many people came, and it was beautiful, and it made me feel good that people still wanted to support me.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, I think that us just creating the opportunities for them to continue to do it. I think, like you said, if we just say, hey, I'm doing this thing, if you could come, that would be great, instead of just expecting them to just do it on their own. Because I think a lot of people do want to remember our babies, but they have busy lives too. And, I try really hard not to blame them, for
Right.
not remembering. But sometimes it can be hurtful when it's close family or like you think you should remember them,
Mhm.
but yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place with that one, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and also I think a lot of times people in our lives, if they don't hear us talking about them, they don't want to step on our toes and upset us for any reason. They don't realize, even if we tell them a million times, we think about our children all the time. You telling me a memory about them, or you just saying their name or anything, or, I wish Lydia was here, or any sort of sentiment that shows me that you're thinking about them. If we're not talking about them, I think they still are worried that they're going to upset us. And that's the
Yeah.
last thing people want to do. They love us, they want to support us, but they walk on eggshells because, like, oh, I don't want to make Danielle cry. But, like, no, like, if you mention her name, I might cry, but it might be happy tears because I'm so grateful that you took
Yeah.
the time to really think about her and to consider how her loss in this world really matters.
And I guess that's kind of the same way with other types of loss too. Like maybe you don't bring up somebody's mom whose mom passed away or things like that.
Right.
I just think that when it comes to pregnancy loss and baby loss and losing a child, that people are a lot more sensitive about it than like other kinds of loss.
Right. No, I agree completely. And I know that I was completely guilty of doing all of those things before losing Lydia.
Oh
I know
yeah, I'm sure
in
I
my
was too.
mind of, like, oh, I don't want to mention them because I don't want to upset them. That's a normal reaction. So I don't blame anyone for doing that. That's why I just feel like I really need to work hard to make sure that people know, like, it is good to talk about Lydia. It's not just okay, it's perfect. It's exactly what I need.
Yeah, that's why I think, just like you said, that it's important to keep sharing our stories, to keep talking about them because we expect people to just know and they don't know. So I think that just educating them and telling them, this is what I need, this is what I want you to do, this is, how I would like her to be remembered. I think that helps everybody know, like, oh, okay, this is okay to talk about.
Yeah, because I mean, the fact of the matter is we live in a grief illiterate society, right? Like, people don't know what to do, people don't know what to say. We don't have training in grief. We don't have any information as to how to deal with things. So people,
Yeah.
sometimes they need a little guidebook, I guess. There's no right way too. When you mention Lydia in front of me versus my husband, we might respond very differently. I might talk about her for the next 15 minutes after that, where my husband would just say, thank you, and kind of move on because he's more, a quieter, like, introspective person. So, but it doesn't mean that he's not thinking about her every second of the day too.
Right. Yeah, if you ask me, I'll just keep talking. So if you bring that up, like you open
Yep.
the floodgates there.
Exactly. That I relate 100%.
So if you had any advice to give for somebody who was going through loss, what would that be?
To find your people. I mean, that's the number one for me because that has really shaped my journey. So, and it doesn't have to be a local group, finding your people online, just in joining, in creating a Love from Lydia Instagram account. I've met so many other lost parents who I've never met in person, but we talk every day and we share stories, and they're so dear to me, and we really encourage each other to honor our children. We honor each other's children. I mean, like, that's the part that I didn't expect, is that you wind up loving other people's children so much that you've never met. Like, I know some of the other children's favorite things. I know, their first words. I know so much about them, and I've never had the opportunity to meet them. And I it feels good to honor other people. Like, you hear people's signs for their children, like our symbol for Lydia is a white heart. And so, just like, if anyone is just, doing their own thing, they've never met Lydia, but they'll send me a text and just say, oh, Lydia visited me today, because they saw a white heart somewhere. And I might do the same to someone else who has a different sign for their child. So, like, those relationships are just so special. And I mean, I'm closer to some of these people that I've met throughout this grief journey than I am to people who I've known my whole life. And in just this short period of time, it's been less than 2 years. And I consider so many people that I've met my family.
There's nothing like the bond between lost parents.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And we're just so supportive of each other. We love each other. You know, I think the other thing that I would say is like find something to keep yourself busy. Like find how I crocheted, that was so helpful to me. Like doing something that was purposeful that helped me kind of get through the day. I, and I do things all the time to honor her. I have the little free library I have left from Lydia. I have the hearts. I go to the cemetery every day. The cemetery is just a half a mile from my house, so I walk there every day. Now I bring the baby to visit her sister, and that's a surreal moment too. It's like, you know, hi, Liddy, we're here, and say hi to your sister, and just I could have never in a million years thought like this would be my life. And it's weird and it sucks, but it's it's I had the opportunity to honor her. I saw a few months after I buried Lydia there. So Lydia's buried in right next to the baby section in the cemetery because she was at this like weird spot where she was too big for the baby section, but she was too small for a regular size plot. So they kind of fit her wherever they could. And it just so happens that she is like adjacent to where the babies are. And I saw families at the baby section and just, bringing their children and their grandchildren there. Like there are babies that are buried there that from the 1950s. And, so there's babies well older than I am. And just the fact that the parents are still visiting them, I guess, I knew that would always be my life, but seeing that in real time and seeing them bring next generations, it's like that kind of hit me with reality. Like, this is my life now. And she's always going to be a part of our lives. And now I definitely can't move because there's no way I'm going to be far from the cemetery.
Ugh, that's like making me tear up over here. Like, all, the people still visiting. I mean,
Yeah.
like, of course
Still
they
leaving
would be, but,
flowers decades and
you
decades later. Like, that's going to be me. I know it. But especially like the really, really old ones. Like I can imagine the parents of those babies are very, very old at this point. So, and it shows how much love we have for our children, and they're never going to be forgotten, no matter how old they were, no matter how long they lived, all of that. They're always going to be our children, and we're always going to love them, and we're always going to honor them.
yeah, definitely. And I love too that, like you said, that they're bringing other generations. I mean, because then, like, it's not going to stop when the parents pass away. Like, it's going to keep going, and that's what we want.
Absolutely.
So were there any other like particular resources that you would recommend to people going through loss? I know you said you went through Facebook groups. Like, did you find any particular ones you want to recommend for people, or any books or anything like that?
Books, definitely. I think Facebook groups can be a little tricky because sometimes they're just so big that it's hard to really get to know people. So I really connected with the people that in the groups that I joined. So I joined a few virtual groups, especially in the beginning, and those were really helpful. And I still keep in touch with many of those moms. And then, of course, the local group that I talked about. But really like finding your people is
Mhm.
huge. In terms of books, I I really found a bunch of books helpful. I really liked Colin Campbell's Finding the Words. Do you know that book?
I haven't read that one.
I always recommend that one to people who have not experienced grief because first of all, I just really love his writing style. He's a lost parent and he, he's sarcastic, he's funny, and that he has some dark humor, and like that's me. I'm not the type of person that can listen to these like self-help books, and I if it's too self-helpy,
I'm
I
like,
lose
no.
interest, and I'm like, no, I need something to like really reel me in. So that one was really helpful. I really find comfort in Laura Lynn Jackson's books, The Medium. Laura Lynn Jackson, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but I actually wrote down a quote from one of her books. If I can read it, I feel like it's really, it really resonated with me. So she writes, what we do on this earth in the wake of losing a loved one matters greatly. The most powerful way that we can honor someone who has crossed is to spread light and love in their name. Doing that work not only keeps that person present in our lives, but also allows our loved one on the other side to still be a positive influence on our world. It all matters. When we turn tragedy into hope, our loved ones on the other side don't just see this, they celebrate it.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, yeah, it really resonated with me. I also like Megan Devine's book. There are so many books that I've listened to because I find that audiobooks are much more helpful for me. I don't have the time to sit and read. I wish I did. But, when I'm washing bottles or going for a walk or doing anything like that, that's all been really helpful.
I like listening to books and stuff in the car, but I find that if I try to listen to it like when I'm at home, I get too distracted and I'm like, wait, what did they just say? Because my mind's always like in a million places, but I'll definitely have to check out those recommendations though, because there's so many good books out there that I haven't even read yet.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really great books. Another thing I just wanted to mention is what has also helped me through my grief is advocating for myself and for some of the injustices that we experienced in the process. So, like 6 months after Lydia died, I asked to meet with the chief of police in our town to just kind of like debrief how everything went. And he was really receptive. I feel very fortunate that he was open to the conversation and didn't take offense to anything I was saying. He was really, understanding. So I just talked to him about how some of the things that happened that day, like the decisions that were made, were really, really contributed to the trauma that we experienced that day. So, for example, when Lydia died, I went with one of the police officers to the hospital because I couldn't travel in the ambulance since they were using the defibrillator. So, but they put me in the back of a police car. And, you know, when I'm already can't breathe, I'm not next to my daughter, I don't know what's going on. That's really hard, and I'm already thinking, well, I don't know why she died. Now I'm in the back of a police car. Like, did I do something wrong? So I'm already blaming myself as a parent. I later come to find that I could have never have seen this or prepared for it or, done something to stop it. But that contributed. And so another person, another police officer kept my husband at the house. They had to take pictures and they had to do a whole bunch of things. And I just kept saying, like, is someone going to drive him? Like, what's going to happen? And one of the officers said that, he was right behind us. Meanwhile, he's texting saying, they won't let me leave. They're saying I have to wait until the detectives get here. So I wound up being in the hospital by myself for a very long time. And like I said, like laying in bed with her body by myself. When the doctor came out and said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop, using the defibrillator. We have to call it. And I was like, can you just wait for my husband to get here so we could be together when that happens? And he was like, it's not advised at this point. She never showed any signs of life. It's it's not going to happen. And so just not having him with me, not like us not having the support of each other was really hard. And the chief of police was really kind and he validated everything I said and he agreed with me. And he said it's also the fact that it was Christmas and a lot of the seasoned officers, they have seniority, so they can choose to have that day off and be with their families. So those who are responding were the officers who maybe don't have families yet and who are so new to the job that like they're doing everything by the book and they're not allowing for like that empathy to kind of creep through and be like, okay, like, I can keep her in the front seat because she's not a risk to anyone right now. I can, I don't have to lock the door. I don't have to, I can keep them together as long as someone's supervising and watching both of them. Because we understood, if a child dies in the house, you have to investigate it. We're both mental health professionals. We know there are really scary, terrible things that have happened in the world. And we just kept saying, like, you can take all the pictures you want. You can, go through our drawers. Like, you could do whatever. We have nothing to hide. Just like, let us be together. So after that, I wound up talking to another mental health professional And we're in the process of creating a trauma-informed training for first responders. So we're hoping to get that moving by the summer. So it's another program that I'm working on, which I think is so important, just, in how to work with parents who are grieving, especially with the sudden death of a child, particularly when they die in the home, because you have SIDS, you have SUDC, you have these unexplained deaths. And the first thing from a police officer's point of view might be, I have to investigate this because there could be something, that was caused by the parents, which I totally understand. But it's learning how to best support families through that time while also continuing to do your job effectively.
Yeah, and I can definitely see how that would have led to even more trauma for you guys, because that's a moment that your husband can't ever get back.
Right?
He can't. And like you said, I know that they do need to investigate, but it's like these are traumatic moments for everybody involved, and you're making it worse by treating them like criminals before you even know anything.
Right.
So I definitely think that what you're doing is very needed.
Thank you. Yeah, I really am looking forward to that because I think it's important for everyone to hear it. Because I don't think it's, and like I explained to the chief of police, I don't think there were any ill intentions in that moment. I think it was really just like not realizing how one thing could affect another thing there was also no follow-up. So no one contacted us after we received the autopsy and said, like, just letting you know, like, the case is closed, we're not investigating anymore. Or like there was no follow-up as a community to see like how we're doing, or and even from the hospital, and I think we fell through the cracks because one, it was Christmas, and another is the fact that when you go into the emergency room, a lot of times the families are not connected with, palliative care or any types of people who help with moving forward. And that's a big issue. There needs to be more support surrounding those areas. So I'm really hoping that with this COPE program that I'm creating, that no one will fall through the cracks in this moment. And, they'll be able to be referred by hospital staff, by funeral home staff, by first responders, whoever is like seeing those families in that moment. Which, I do want to invite, I know you have a lot of listeners who are lost parents, and I really want to encourage you, if you have any interest in volunteering as, a volunteer, lost parent volunteer for COPE, please look at my website, or if you have anyone that you want to refer, I have both applications on the website, which is lovefromlydia.com, because I can't run this program without the volunteers. So the program is designed for families who lost a child in the last trimester of pregnancy to 18 years old. So that's the area that we cover. And volunteers have to be at least a year out in their grief, ideally more, because as we know, you're constantly grieving, you're constantly seeing new aspects of grief, especially after you have a rainbow baby. If you are able to have a rainbow baby, that brings up a whole nother layer of grief, right? So,
Yeah, all these layers of grief that we deal with.
yep, yep, absolutely.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
I don't think so. I really just community is everything in this life. Yeah. I love the people that I've met through this journey. I hate that I had to meet them, but I love them anyway. I love their children. They love my child, and that's so important. So,
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Danielle. There have been many episodes where I ask loss and infertility parents what their advice would be to others going through loss. So many times it comes up that finding support and community is key. It's one of those things that you may hear over and over, but it is seriously the best thing you can possibly have after loss. It's always the advice I give when asked about it as well. Without the community, I truly believe that we aren't able to heal as much as we can if we are part of the community. It gives us the freedom to talk about our children and to share their names and share their stories. And we get to know other people and know their child's name and their child's story. We see signs from our babies and signs from other people's babies. And so many in the community have gone on to start projects, organizations, businesses, write books, and so many other amazing things. The lost community is full of so many amazing people doing so many amazing things. We all show our grief differently, and whether you are one providing support for somebody else by listening to their story, or if you're out there starting a nonprofit or anything else in between, it doesn't matter because everything we do in this community is important and everything is meaningful. So please seek out that support. Don't go through it alone. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.